Imagine your sanctuary violated, your privacy ignored. What would you do when an uninvited wedding takes over your private property, forcing you to the brink? Homeowner's desperate stand leads to an unbelievable lockdown, trapping dozens inside. You won't believe the shocking lengths this man went to reclaim his peace. Don't miss what happens next. The first crack in Jack Carter's meticulously constructed solitude wasn't a whisper. It was a brazen assault. His barn, a fortress of weathered timber and cherished memories, stood sentinel over the sprawling acres of his private domain, a sacred buffer between his quiet life and the encroaching chaos of suburbia. He was a man defined by his boundaries, a stoic sentinel of his own peace, far removed from the petty tyrannies of neighborhood committees. Yet, that peace was about to be shattered by the most audacious invasion imaginable. It began not with polite inquiry, but with an entitlement so profound it bordered on delusion. 3 weeks before the day that would etch itself into local legend, the shrill, saccharine voice of HOA Karen sliced through the morning quiet like a rusty blade. Karen, a self-anointed empress of the Homeowners Association, wielded her minimal authority with maximum malice. She was the architect of trivial disputes, the enforcer of absurd rules, a woman who saw every square foot of the community as her personal dominion. Jack, though nominally within the HOA's sprawling reach, had always been beyond her grasp. His land, his life, his barn, they were his. "Mr. Carter," Karen chirped, a venomous honey dripping from each syllable. "Karen from the HOA. We're beyond thrilled to announce my daughter Tiffany's wedding and your barn. Darling is simply perfect." Jack froze, a bolt wrench slipping from his oil-stained fingers. "My barn, Karen. My barn isn't a venue. It's private property. It's a working barn." "Oh, don't be so provincial, Jack," she tittered, her laughter brittle and grating. "It's not working. It's rustic. Tiffany desires that authentic, rural charm. We'll have a few quaint tables, perhaps some fairy lights, barely a blip. And as a board member, I'm thrilled to maximize our community's assets." The blood began to thrum in Jack's ears. "My barn is not a community asset. Karen, it's my asset, and it's not available, ever, for anything, especially not a wedding." His voice, usually calm, held an edge of steel. He hung up, a desperate hope that the finality of his tone would penetrate her thick skin. Jack was a man of few words, and his no was meant to be an unyielding wall. But Karen knew no walls. A week later, he saw them, strangers in neon vests, brandishing measuring tapes, trampling across his untamed fields, converging on his barn. Surveyors, for a tent. Mrs. Davies' instructions. They mumbled, avoiding his gaze. Karen, always Karen. He called her, his patience stretched to breaking point. "Karen, what in God's name are your people doing on my land? What part of not available do you not comprehend?" "Oh, those are just preliminary assessments, Jack," she cooed, entirely unconcerned. "Tiffany simply must have it. And frankly, this is an excellent opportunity for the HOA to demonstrate communal cohesion. We've even decided to waive any fee for you, considering your contribution." "My contribution?" Jack's voice dropped to a guttural rumble that vibrated with suppressed rage. "There is no contribution. You are trespassing. I will call the sheriff if you set one more foot on my land." "Trespassing, Jack, don't be absurd. We are neighbors and I am an HOA board member. We are simply facilitating a beautiful community event. It's settled. The date is set. Saturday, 2 weeks from now. We'll need access from dawn for setup." She clicked off, leaving him stranded in a silent fury. The sheer, unadulterated gall of it stole his breath. He considered barbed wire, guard dogs, legal injunctions, but each felt like an overreaction, a surrender to Karen's madness. He was a man of logic, a man who believed in due process. So he sent a certified letter, a formal, unassailable declaration of his property rights, citing trespass laws, attaching his deed, outlining in stark, unambiguous terms that any entry onto his land, especially his barn, would be considered a criminal act. He underscored his absolute refusal to consent. Her reply came in the form of a flurry of glossy flyers plastered across the neighborhood. Tiffany and Chad's rustic barn wedding at the beautiful Carter homestead. Carter homestead. They had rebranded his sacred space, transforming his defiance into a backdrop for their fantasy. He watched, aghast, as catering trucks, florists, and legions of event planners began to amass at the very edge of his property, their trucks like vultures circling prey. Then, the ultimate desecration. The barn's massive doors were thrown wide, and furniture, sound systems, and gaudy decorations began to pour into its hallowed space. They weren't asking, they were taking. Karen, a vision of self-importance in a sequined gown, flitted about like a malevolent hummingbird, directing the invasion with imperious gestures. Her daughter, the bride, drifted through the chaos, a porcelain doll of blissful ignorance. The groom, a slick-haired accomplice, clung to Karen's swain, nodding, affirming, condoning the blatant violation. Jack saw Karen actually swat away a caterer who dared to inquire about payment for the barn's use. "Oh, darling, it's a gift from the community," she declared, her voice carrying on the wind, a cruel echo of his own violated ownership, as the sun bled into a fiery orange, casting long, accusing shadows across his occupied land. The first guests began to arrive. A river of pastel dresses and sharp suits flowed towards his barn, drawn by the pulsing, tinny music now emanating from within. The wedding was not just about to begin, it was already a monstrous, living entity, consuming his privacy, devouring his peace. Jack watched them, each grinning face, each tinkling laugh, a fresh assault. He had warned them. He had pleaded. He had written. Now, the time for words was over. His solitude was not a request. It was a right, and he would reclaim it, one locked door at a time. The festive cacophony spilling from Jack's barn grated on his nerves, a symphony of disrespect. Every laugh, every clink of glasses, every beat of the celebratory music was a hammer blow against his carefully constructed peace. He stood at his farmhouse window, a silent sentinel, watching the last of the arriving guests disappear into the gaping maw of his barn. Bridesmaids in their matching blush gowns, groomsmen in ill-fitting suits, a sea of unfamiliar faces, all of them complicit in this grand invasion. Oblivious to the simmering fury of the true landowner, he saw the groom, a lanky figure named Chad, standing near the entrance, adjusting his tie, a faint, self-satisfied smirk on his face. He seemed to be relishing the spectacle, the grandness of their chosen, unbidden venue. This wasn't just Karen's arrogance, it was a collective disregard for property rights, a dangerous precedent. Jack walked out to his porch, his boots thudding softly on the worn wood. The twilight deepened, painting the sky in hues of deep indigo and fiery orange, a stark contrast to the bright, garish lights now illuminating his barn. He could hear Karen's booming laughter, easily distinguishable even over the music. She was clearly in her element, basking in the glow of her daughter's perfect day, utterly devoid of any shame or concern for the chaos she had wrought. Jack picked up the heavy-duty logging chain he'd laid out earlier, its cold steel a reassuring weight in his hands. Beside it lay a padlock, thick and imposing, designed to secure heavy machinery, not to imprison wedding guests. A sense of grim resolve settled over him. He was a man of action, not empty threats. As he approached the barn, the noise intensified. He could hear speeches beginning, the clinking of forks against plates, the forced gaiety of polite conversation. The double doors of the barn were still wide open, a brazen invitation to the outside world, a testament to Karen's certainty that no one would dare challenge her. This was his chance. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his years of working the land lending his movements a practiced, almost silent grace. He bypassed the main guest entrance, making his way to the less conspicuous side of the barn, where a smaller, auxiliary door usually remained latched. He had chosen this entry point for a reason. It was less visible from the main party area, offering him a few precious moments of unobserved action. He found the sturdy, weathered support beam beside the main barn doors, exactly as he'd planned. No one was looking. No one was paying attention to the periphery. All eyes were on the bride, on the speeches, on the open bar. He swiftly wrapped the heavy chain around the massive handles of the barn's main doors, looping it through the sturdy metal, then around the reinforced wooden beam that supported the entire frame. The chain clanked softly, but the sound was swallowed by the blare of a pop song and a fresh burst of laughter from inside. With a decisive click, he snapped the heavy padlock shut, securing the chain, rendering the main doors immobile. He then moved with equal speed to the auxiliary door. This one, too, he secured with a second, smaller chain and padlock, ensuring that every direct exit was sealed. He checked his work, testing the strength of the chains, feeling the satisfying rigidity of the locked doors. They were trapped, all of them. The bridesmaids, the guests, Karen herself, the smug groom, all confined within the very space they had so contemptuously usurped. A sudden hush fell over the crowd inside as the music abruptly cut out. Jack froze, his heart thumping. But it wasn't because of his actions. It was an awkward lull, perhaps between songs, or a technical glitch. He used the brief silence to his advantage. Pulling out his phone, he had already set it to record. He began speaking, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the unexpected quiet. "Attention, everyone inside," Jack projected, his voice carrying surprising authority across the short distance. "My name is Jack Carter. This is my property. This is my barn. You are currently trespassing on private land." A murmur rippled through the assembled guests. A few heads turned, confused. Then, Karen's voice, sharp and incredulous, pierced the air from within. "Jack, what in the world are you doing? This is Tiffany's wedding." "This is my barn, Karen," Jack retorted, his voice rising, every word laced with cold fury. "And you and everyone in there are here without my permission. I warned you. I sent you letters. I told you repeatedly that my barn was not available. You ignored me. You trespassed. You invaded my privacy, and you organized a commercial event on my property without my consent, without payment, and with complete disregard for my rights." He raised his phone higher, ensuring it captured the stunned faces that were now pressing against the barn's windows. "Consider this your final warning. You have 5 minutes to agree to a substantial compensation for the unauthorized use of my property, and to arrange for the immediate and complete cleanup of all your equipment and debris. Otherwise, these doors remain locked, and you will remain inside." The initial confusion among the guests morphed into alarm. Bridesmaids exchanged worried glances. The groom looked pale. Karen, however, was incandescent with rage. "You absolute lunatic. You can't do this. We'll call the police. This is kidnapping." "It's not kidnapping, Karen," Jack stated calmly, though his heart hammered. "It's a lawful detainment of trespassers on my private property. I've clearly marked my land. I've given ample warning. You forced your way in. Now you can force your way out. Or you can come to an agreement. The choice is yours." He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet inside the barn and the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Then, a new voice cut through the tension. It was Jack's best friend, Mark, pulling up in his battered pickup truck, his face a mixture of surprise and grim amusement. Jack had called him earlier, not to ask for help, but to have a witness, someone who could document the absurdity he knew was coming. Mark, ever loyal, had arrived just in time. He quickly understood the situation, pulling out his own phone and starting to record, capturing Jack's impassioned speech and the growing panic inside the barn. "This is gold. Jack, Mark muttered, his grin widening. Absolute gold. The guests inside the barn began to bang on the doors, a few desperate shouts echoing from within. Let us out. We have to go. The bride, Tiffany, began to wail, her perfect wedding dissolving into a nightmare. The groom, Chad, frantically pulled out his phone, attempting to make a call, his face a mask of disbelief and frustration. Karen, however, seemed to lose all semblance of control. She screamed threats at Jack, her face contorted with fury, her voice raw and shrill as she pounded on the inside of the locked doors. You will regret this, Jack Carter. You will regret this for the rest of your miserable life. Jack simply leaned against the locked doors, the cool metal a comfort against his back. He wasn't enjoying their distress, but he felt a powerful sense of reclaiming what was his. The sheer audacity of their invasion had left him no other recourse. He looked at Mark, who gave him a thumbs up. The video was capturing everything. The trapped guests, the screaming Karen, the bewildered bride, and Jack, standing calmly, a beacon of defiance against the tide of entitlement. This was no longer just about a barn. It was about the fundamental right to protect one's home and property from those who believed rules didn't apply to them. And as the chaotic cries from inside the barn grew louder, Jack knew one thing for certain: the story of the barn barricade was just beginning. The scene outside Jack's barn quickly escalated from a spectacle to a full-blown siege. Inside, the initial panic gave way to a desperate frenzy. Shouts turned into screams. The rhythmic thud of fists against the sturdy wooden doors punctuated by angry, increasingly frantic demands to be let out. Karen's voice, a banshee wail, cut through the din, calling Jack every expletive imaginable. You absolute psycho! This is a criminal act! You'll rot in jail! She shrieked, her face pressed against a grimy window pane, distorted by desperation and rage. The bride, Tiffany, was now sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect white dress crumpled, mascara streaking down her face. Her dreams of a rustic chic wedding had collapsed into a chaotic nightmare. Mark, Jack's friend, kept his phone steady, capturing every agonizing detail, the raw emotion, the undeniable visual proof of Jack's lawful stand against flagrant trespass, was all being meticulously documented. This is going viral, Jack, Mark mumbled, his eyes wide, already envisioning the online storm. The internet's gonna explode. A few of the more determined guests inside, mostly younger men, started trying to force the doors, but the heavy chains and industrial-grade locks held fast. The barn, built for durability and security, was now serving its ultimate purpose, an impenetrable fortress. Jack remained calm. A stark contrast to the hysteria within, he stood his ground, maintaining a respectable distance but never taking his eyes off the barn. He knew his rights, and he had exhausted every polite avenue. This was the consequence of their arrogant disregard. Within minutes, the first police cruisers arrived, their sirens a mournful crescendo piercing the evening air. Karen, spotting the flashing lights through the barn windows, shrieked with renewed vigor. Officer, officer, we're trapped. This madman has locked us in. It's kidnapping. Two uniformed officers, a grizzled veteran named Officer Miller and a younger, visibly bewildered Officer Chen, approached cautiously. They took in the scene: the locked barn, the disheveled, distraught faces pressed against the windows, the furious woman inside screaming for rescue, and Jack Carter, standing calmly beside his friend, who was still filming. Mr. Carter, Officer Miller began, his voice slow and deliberate, assessing the situation. We've received reports of a disturbance, impossible unlawful detainment. Can you explain what's going on here? Jack lowered his phone, though Mark continued to record. Officer, Jack replied, his voice clear and unwavering. This is my property, my barn. For weeks, I've repeatedly told HOA board member Karen Davies, who is currently inside, that she did not have permission to use my barn for this wedding. I sent certified letters. I posted No trespassing signs. I gave verbal warnings. They ignored every single one. They trespassed, brought dozens of people onto my land, and set up a commercial event in my private barn without my consent or payment. They are trespassers. Officer, I'm simply exercising my right to protect my property. Officer Miller raised an eyebrow, glancing at the frantic faces in the barn. Sir, even if they are trespassing, locking people inside is a serious matter. That could be construed as false imprisonment. With all due respect, officer, Jack countered, drawing on every ounce of his research into property law. False imprisonment implies unlawful restraint. These individuals are here unlawfully. I offered them a chance to rectify the situation, to agree to terms for their unauthorized use and to leave. They refused. I am merely preventing further trespass and damage to my property. They are free to leave once they acknowledge their trespass and agree to compensate me for the egregious violation of my rights. He pulled out a certified letter and a copy of his deed, handing them to Officer Miller. I have documented everything. Officer, every warning, every refusal, every attempt to resolve this peacefully. Officer Miller took the documents, his expression turning thoughtful as he scanned them. He was a seasoned officer, well-versed in the complexities of property disputes. He looked at the screaming Karen, then back at the calm, resolute Jack. Mr. Carter, he said, a hint of respect in his tone. We understand you have rights, but this situation is highly unusual. Perhaps we can mediate a solution. The solution is simple, officer, Jack stated. They agree to pay for damages and unauthorized use, and they clear my property immediately. Until then, they stay. On the inside, Karen, overhearing the conversation, shrieked, "We're not paying you a dime, you greedy lunatic! We're calling our lawyers. You're going to jail." Officer Miller sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He knew dealing with HOA Karens was a special kind of nightmare, but this was a new level of chaos. He turned to Officer Chen. "Officer Chen, stay here. Don't let anyone else in or out. I'm going to make some calls." Officer Miller retreated to his cruiser, ostensibly to consult with his superiors and legal counsel. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The trapped guests, witnessing Jack's composure and the police's apparent hesitation to immediately intervene on Karen's behalf, began to turn their anger from Jack towards Karen. "Karen, what did you do?" someone shouted from within. "He warned you. Why didn't you listen?" "This is all your fault." "Karen, another voice chimed in. "My phone's dying. I have a flight tomorrow." The blame game had begun. The facade of wedding bliss shattered, revealing the ugly truth of entitlement and blatant disrespect. The groom, Chad, looked utterly miserable, slumping against the window. His initial smugness replaced by panic. He was realizing that he was caught in the crossfire of a deeply personal vendetta, and his new mother-in-law was the instigator. A revelation began to dawn on many inside Jack Carter wasn't just some eccentric farmer. He was a man pushed to his absolute limit, and he had meticulously prepared for this moment. The meticulously documented warnings, the calmness in the face of their collective hysteria, the sheer force of his conviction, it all painted a picture of a man who was entirely within his rights. The tide of public opinion, at least among the trapped wedding guests, was slowly beginning to turn. Hours passed, the sun had long since set, and the barn was now a chaotic beacon of flashing police lights and the relentless banging of agitated guests. Officer Miller returned, a grim expression on his face. He walked directly to Jack. "Mr. Carter, I've spoken with legal. While the optics of this are challenging, and we strongly advise against self-help remedies, your documentation of trespass is solid, and given the specific circumstances, including repeated warnings and the commercial nature of the unauthorized event, we can't immediately force you to open the barn without a court order, which would take time. However, we also have to ensure public safety." "They're safe inside, officer," Jack stated. "My barn is structurally sound. There's plenty of air. Restrooms are available. Food and drink were brought in by their caterers. We've contacted the HOA's legal counsel." Officer Miller continued, ignoring Jack's assurances. They're not pleased. And your friend's video, Mr. Carter, it's already got over 1 million views. The comments are overwhelmingly in your favor. It seems Ms. Davies' reputation is taking a hit. Jack glanced at Mark, who gave him a triumphant wink. The power had indeed shifted. The court of public opinion, swift and unforgiving, was already delivering its verdict. Karen's carefully constructed image as a pillar of the community was crumbling in real time, exposed as a petty tyrant who abused her position. Officer Miller finally stepped closer to the barn doors, his voice now addressing those inside, amplified by a megaphone. Attention, all inside the barn. This is Officer Miller with the County Sheriff's Department. Mr. Carter has provided substantial documentation of trespass. We are currently mediating. We advise you to cooperate. The HOA's legal team is now engaged. They are strongly urging Miss Davies to negotiate a settlement for damages and unauthorized use of Mr. Carter's property, and to arrange for the immediate cleanup. Failure to do so will result in further legal action, potentially including charges for trespass and civil lawsuits. The shouting inside subsided, replaced by a stunned silence. The implication was clear: the police were not going to break down the doors and rescue them. They were supporting Jack. Karen's cries of kidnapping had fallen on deaf ears. The harsh reality of their situation began to sink in. They were not victims. They were trespassers. And the man who had warned them, the quiet farmer they had so easily dismissed, had just turned their dream wedding into a legal and public relations nightmare. The power had unequivocally shifted. The ball was now in Karen's court, and she was clearly losing. The harsh glare of the police spotlights illuminated the grim tableau within the barn, stripping away any last vestiges of wedding day fantasy. The abrupt silence that followed Officer Miller's ultimatum was heavy, pregnant with the crushing weight of reality. Karen Davies, her face streaked with tears and smeared makeup, looked utterly broken. Her once unyielding posture now slumped. Her carefully cultivated image of neighborhood matriarch had been obliterated, replaced by the humiliating spectacle of a woman cornered, exposed, and undeniably in the wrong. The bride, Tiffany, was beyond tears. She simply stared blankly, her ruined dress a symbol of her shattered dreams. The groom, Chad, finally losing his cool, began to shout at Karen, his voice raw with panic. "Mom, please, just sign it. This is a disaster. We can't stay here. Everyone's furious." His outburst was merely the spark. A torrent of frustrated voices erupted from the trapped guests, their polite veneer long gone. "Karen, what possessed you? He warned you for weeks. My babysitter has to leave. My car is almost out of gas. This is outrageous. You dragged us all into this." The collective fury of dozens of humiliated wedding guests, combined with the grim faces of the officers and the silent, unblinking lens of Mark's phone, proved to be a far more potent weapon than any legal threat. Karen, the self-proclaimed empress, was now a pariah, trapped not just by Jack's locks, but by the scathing judgment of her own social circle. Officer Miller, ever the pragmatist, pressed the advantage. He held up the clipboard again, the compensation agreement clearly visible. "Ms. Davies, this is your final opportunity to resolve this amicably. Mr. Carter's terms are clear compensation for the unauthorized commercial use of his property, for the violation of his privacy, and for the extensive inconvenience. The amount is substantial, as I said, but it covers his actual losses and serves as a deterrent against future such actions. Sign it, and we can all go home." He spoke directly to Karen, his gaze unwavering, projecting an authority that stripped away any remaining pretense she held. Through the grimy barn window, Jack watched Karen's internal struggle. Her jaw worked furiously, her eyes darting between the unyielding faces of the officers, the furious glares of the guests, and the calm, resolute figure of Jack himself. This was more than money. It was the complete dismantling of her ego, the public shattering of her belief in her own untouchable authority. Her empire of petty rules and assumed privilege had collapsed into a heap of shame and recrimination. Finally, with a guttural cry of defeat, she lunged for the clipboard, snatching the pen and scrawling her name with a viciousness that belied her trembling hand. It was less a signature and more a surrender. "It's signed," Officer Miller announced, confirming the legality of the agreement. He nodded to Jack, a subtle glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "All right, Mr. Carter, the terms are met. You can open the doors." Jack approached the barn, the heavy logging chain of familiar weight in his hands. The metallic rasp of the padlock disengaging echoed ominously in the sudden silence. The thud of the chain falling to the ground was a resounding punctuation mark to the night's drama. He gripped the massive wooden doors, and with a slow, deliberate heave, swung them wide open. A tidal wave of humanity surged out, a chaotic mass of disheveled finery and bruised egos. They spilled onto the grass, blinking in the harsh police lights, their eyes darting nervously, desperate to avoid eye contact with Jack. The bridesmaids, their pastel gowns now creased and stained, hurried past, their faces flushed with embarrassment. The groom, Chad, literally dragged his tearful bride, Tiffany, towards a waiting car, muttering apologies and desperate reassurances. No one spoke to Jack, no one thanked him. They simply wanted to vanish, to erase the memory of their humiliating captivity. Karen, a broken figure, her expensive dress now looking like a shroud, was practically shoved into a waiting SUV by her grim-faced legal counsel, who had finally arrived, too late to prevent the catastrophe. Her reign was over, as the last car sped away, leaving only the spectral glow of police cruisers and the lingering scent of stale champagne and shattered dreams. Jack stood alone amidst the abandoned decorations. Mark clapped him on the shoulder, a wide, genuine grin spreading across his face. "You did it, buddy. You absolutely did it." The aftermath unfolded with breathtaking speed. Mark's raw, unfiltered video, uploaded directly from his phone, exploded across every social media platform imaginable. Farmer Locke's wedding guests in barn blazed across national news headlines. The narrative was clear, powerful, and universally relatable. A quiet man pushed to his breaking point, standing up to the oppressive, entitled power of an HOA. The comments section was a tsunami of support. "HOAs are out of control. This guy's a legend." Finally, someone taught those Karens a lesson. Respect private property. The online world had found its new champion. The public outcry was so immense that the HOA, facing an unprecedented wave of condemnation and potential lawsuits, moved with surprising alacrity. A formal, deeply apologetic statement was issued, distancing the entire association from Karen's rogue and reprehensible actions. An emergency ethics committee was convened, leading to Karen's immediate and unceremonious removal from the board. Stripped of all her perceived authority, she also faced severe fines from the HOA for bringing such public disgrace upon them. On top of the legally binding compensation to Jack, her reputation, meticulously built on a foundation of perceived power and social status, was utterly annihilated. She became a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked entitlement. The compensation Jack received was indeed substantial, more than enough to cover the minor legal fees he incurred and to act as a significant payment for the trespass and distress. He didn't splurge. Instead, he invested in his property, not just for security, but for peace of mind. He commissioned a custom-made, ornate wrought iron gate at the entrance to his long driveway, adorned with a sign that simply stated, "Private property, trespassers will be detained and prosecuted." He reinforced the barn doors with even stronger steel plating and installed state-of-the-art security cameras, ensuring no future community engagement would ever violate his sanctuary again. Jack Carter returned to his quiet life, but not unchanged. The incident had been a crucible, forging his resolve into something unyielding. He had stood firm, alone against a tide of entitlement, and had emerged victorious. The barn, once a backdrop for an unwanted wedding, now stood as a quiet, powerful monument to defiance. It was a tangible testament to the fact that even in an increasingly interconnected world, where boundaries blur and privacy is often eroded, a man's home remains his fortress. The story of the barn barricade echoed far beyond the quiet rural roads, a powerful reminder that some rights are non-negotiable and some lines simply cannot be crossed. Jack Carter, the quiet farmer, had not just reclaimed his barn, he had reaffirmed the fundamental right to defend one's sanctuary, proving that the strongest walls are sometimes built not of brick and mortar, but of unwavering conviction. The saga of Jack Carter's barn barricade stands as a powerful testament to standing firm for your rights and privacy. His fight against entitlement resonated globally, proving that some lines should never be crossed. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of defiance and justice. If this story moved you, please like, share, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what would you have done